Hi, good morning. My name is Creighton Fromer, and I'm the Corporate Counsel for Intellectual Property at Reed Elsevier and LexisNexis. And I'm here on behalf of Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta to talk about e-signatures and the legal ramifications of using e-signatures. First, in the slides, I want to introduce the mission of Pro Bono Partnership is to maximize the impact of pro bono engagement by connecting a network of attorneys with nonprofits in need of free business legal services. In slide 2, you'll see some eligibility rules and other information about Pro Bono Partnership of Atlanta. Please review those if you're interested in working with them. And of course, as an attorney, I like to give disclaimers. The disclaimer here is that the webcast is only offering general guidelines for Georgia nonprofit organizations. It should not be really construed as legal advice. Always consult with an attorney to address your particular situation. So getting into electronic signatures, we're going to talk about what they are, how you can use electronic signatures. What does an online waiver require? It's one of the most common uses of an electronic signature for nonprofits. And then separately, what is a digital signature? And there's maybe some confusion between electronic and digital signatures. And they are different, and how you can best use them. So going to slide 6, what do we mean by an electronic signature? And it's based on Georgia law. It requires several elements. It has to confirm the intent of the person to sign. It has to be unique to the person signing, capable of verification, and if the signature recording is altered, the signature has to become invalid. So it has to be a genuine article, a genuine affixation of the person's intent that can't be changed. And the signed document must be later retrievable and readable by a human. So when we talk about e-signatures, it's really not too much different than a hand signature. It has to be genuine. It has to be from the person. In law, there's 2 ways in Georgia. There's 2 laws that are applicable. There's the Georgia e-signature statute, and then there's also a federal e-sign law. And both those laws are broad in scope. They allow frequent use of e-signatures, but it's still important to understand the needs of e-signatures and what's important to use them. Continuing, I'll give some examples of e-signatures looking at slide 7. Some examples, one would be a web form, and this may be the most common. I think everyone has seen this, where you go to a web form, you fill out some information, and the bottom will be an I accept checkbox. When you click I accept and you click submit, it's going to save that data. It's going to save the metadata about when you clicked it. It's going to save information about your name and your information, and then it'll save that as confirmation of your acceptance. You can affix a digital signature, which we'll talk about later, to a PDF or a Word document. That digital signature is cryptography. It uses cryptography to lock in that signature, that either an image or a date and time, to verify that you actually signed that document. But then it could be also just sending an email. So if an individual says, do you accept this contract? Please accept by returning an email. And you return that email and say, I accept your contract. Courts have found that can be relevant and sufficient for acceptance, and it's essentially an e-signature. When you're putting together these materials, especially for the web form, you want to make sure that you're giving all the relevant information in the contract before you get to the signature portion. You want to make sure that the reader has a chance to read all the necessary terms before they click accept. Just as you would see in a contract, you want to make sure that it's clear and understandable what the information and what the content the reader, the acceptor, should be reviewing. Email. We talked about email, sending the document. That often in emails you'll see somebody's signature line. We talk about signatures and emails, suggesting, I guess, who a person is, but it can also act as a verification. A lot of times these questions come down to evidence and reviews of facts. And then there's other ways that I'm not listing here, that if a party requests a certain way to accept an agreement or to verify somebody's identity, if it's done through a computer and it follows the elements that we discussed, those 2 could be considered electronic signatures. Now we talk about e-signatures, and of course you can do physical signatures as well. There are some benefits to e-signatures. One, it's easier to store and retain, because it's a digital document. You can save it to a hard drive or storage device and retain those documents easy. You don't have to put it away in a file cabinet and make copies. It often requires less staff to manage because you're not dealing with paper copies. You don't have to scan and print. Um, it just saves time. And with that, there's also less chance of human error, so that you have less chance of documents getting lost, accidentally shredded, just misplaced. You can keep it on your hard drive. You can easily make backup copies. It's a more simple way of collecting signatures. But there are some things that electronic signatures don't solve. So, as we talked about with say, an email signature, there's always the chance it could be fraudulent, right? So you could have somebody who got into somebody's computer, sent the email, or got access to the signature, and just pasted it onto their own. There still are opportunities for fraudulent signatures. And then, of course, the normal contract acceptance rules still apply. So you cannot have a minor accept a contract in the same way an adult does. They can void contracts. You're going to have capacity to sign a contract and to make acceptance and agreement. So you do need to be mindful of those issues. Looking at slide 10, some typical ways that nonprofits might use e-signatures. So you may have volunteer waivers, right? So that may be the most common. You want to be able to process many volunteers easily and quickly at low cost and high efficiency. So doing those online, allowing the people to view them at their own opportunity and click the box to accept a volunteer, to be a volunteer, that may be the best way. And then also maybe timesheet submissions. If you have volunteers who are submitting their time and you want them to confirm and sign those materials, it's also a good way to do that. You may also want to use it for assistance requests. If you have folks who need to, especially if they need to confirm certain status, if you need them to verify criteria with their submission status or with their submission, you can do that through an online form that they electronically sign. And setting up an online waiver, I'll talk a little bit about some steps to go through that you may want to use when you want to set up an online waiver. First of all, the first thing you need to do on the website is and upload the waiver agreement, and you'll want to make that, like as I said before, you'll want to put that at the top, make sure it's clear and understandable, that there's no question about where the body of the agreement is and then where the acceptance is. I suggest using an agreement version number or putting a last updated date. You're always going to be making changes to your waiver agreement and other agreements, so you want to make sure that it's clear which version of the agreement that the individual is signing and what they're accepting. And then you'll also want to save that information when you have the person sign document. And of course, retain those old agreements as well. Then you'll also want to have contact information in the confirmation. So after they click I accept, we give them a confirmation page noting that they've accepted. Make sure and put contact information. You want to make sure that they can access the person who holds the agreement in case they need a copy. And then also if they change their mind or if they need to, for any other reason, get back to you as the organization about that agreement, they know who to contact. As I'm walking through this, I want to make sure everybody understands these are just some suggestions and some best practices, but of course there may be other ways, and you may find some, especially with your different culture in your organization, some different elements you may want to add to your online waiver. After the agreement, as I mentioned, the confirmation, after the agreement body, in the confirmation where it talks about how you accept, you want to make sure that the reader understands, I accept the agreement, and that what act they need to follow to accept that agreement. So they need to understand the words in the document, and then also how to accept. So usually you'll see somebody clicking a box. Make sure and don't default the box to on, right? You want them to actually click the box to take that affirmative step, and then click submit to accept that agreement. Sometimes you'll see, and I think it's a good idea, you may also have the reader or the signor have to type their name, to verify that information. Also, another option is to have them add a bit of personal information that only they would know. So as we talked earlier about some of the elements of an electronic signature, you want to make sure that it's clear that that specific individual signed it. And when you get into if unfortunately you have to get into a case of who actually signed it, if there's some debate about that, you want to make it clear to the court and to the other party that only the person who actually wrote the name could have been the one that signed it. So you may ask, depending on the nature of the agreement, you may ask for a street address, you may ask for a phone number, you can ask for the last four digits of a social security number. I've seen a driver's license number, but of course, the more protective or the more sensitive the information, you also need to make sure that you're storing that and retaining it properly. There are also data privacy laws, of course, when you're dealing with some of these types of information. But if it's a publicly available information and it's still maybe only known to that individual, or can at least help confirm that that individual is actually signing, that can be a good process to help provide that evidence. The next part is you want to make it clear how they can decline the acceptance. So you don't want to force them into having to accept that without an option to decline. So you may have a cancel button that just takes them back to the home page, but it helps to make sure that they understand that they can also decline the agreement. And as I mentioned before, having that confirmation page with the contact questions, contact information and questions is also good to have. Then in your systems behind the scenes, so those best practices are really about what the user sees and what the user is doing. On the back end, in your systems, you're also going to want to retain the agreement from version number and the last updated date of the agreement. You're going to want to retain the person's name, the date and time of the acceptance. If you've got somebody who's logging in with a username and password, you can use that as the identification, and that can also help with what I was mentioning earlier, where you need to verify the actual person signed it, where that password, if they've entered the password, that's a good verification that only that individual knows that password and actually signed the document. You may want to collect like I said, you may want to collect other personal information. You want to make sure and retain that. And behind the scenes, if you need to encrypt it, if it's a driver's license number or account number, if it's a full social security number, you want to make sure and encrypt that information. Yes.
Do you have to provide a printable copy of the waiver for the person who signed it to be able to print out?
That's a good question. So the question is, do you have to provide a printable copy for the person to sign, that the person signed? And you do need to make it available. You need to make it available so they can print it out themselves. In the confirmation page, you want to make sure that it's clear that they can print out a copy with their acceptance, or have some access to that printed copy. So in that contact information, you need to make sure that they can contact you, and you can also print a copy for them. So you can make available the print button. I mean, in any web browser, it's going to be available. But there's a clean copy that shows that they accepted it, so they can retain a document of what they accepted. Going on to slide 14, the digital signature, it sounds similar to an electronic signature in semantics, but it's actually more of an extension of an electronic signature. It's a specific type of electronic signature. And you may have seen this in electronic documents where it almost looks like a notary stamp or contains additional information. And it's essentially, as I mentioned, uses cryptography to lock in or to affix a signature to a document that cannot be adjusted. So it uses keys to essentially firm an affixation of either can use an image or uses a certificate to sign a document. And those documents then cannot be altered. The signature cannot be altered. The document cannot be altered once it's been signed. And it provides an extra level of protection for a signature. There are several vendors that provide this. You can use even Adobe Acrobat Pro, the software from Adobe. A fuller version of Adobe Reader will provide signature technology where the user in their software will access their certificate, create basically a digital stamp, and they can sign documents. And that stamp once it's affixed, cannot be altered. And this is a better protection than you may see. Sometimes individuals will will take an image file of their signature, of their written signature, and just paste it onto a document. In that case, and we can talk about more of this later, that's a dangerous step in that somebody else can acquire that image file. It's just maybe a JPEG or a GIF file or bitmap, and affix that to anybody else's, any document. Whereas this digital signature is locked to the individual's computer and tied to that computer, tied to their login and password. So in theory, unless somebody steals your login and password, cannot affix that signature on your behalf. It uses robust technology, strong encryption. There are several other vendors, DocuSign, EchoSign, Certify, or some that I've seen that provide full service digital signature services. So they'll take you from the online access of the document and help you do the digital signature, store the materials, and they've also got technology that'll help pass the document between individuals to make sure that it's had a proper chain of custody. One interesting thing with this technology is I've seen it's starting to merge the digital and physical signature, where with touchscreens and iPads and iPhones, you can use your fingers and still handwrite your signature, and then it'll paste that or affix that into a document using the encryption technology. And this can be good for, if you've got somebody on the road using a mobile device, maybe internal staff who need to sign documents, and gives them an opportunity to use their physical signature, but also get the benefits of digital storage and the efficiencies that come along with that. I think one of the things, digital signatures do cost money. As I mentioned, even the less expensive solutions, if you self use digital signatures with like an Adobe, there is the cost of the full package, and then the DocuSign, EchoSign type vendors do cost money. So it may depend on your organization's budget, which of these you choose, but digital signatures can provide a higher level of protection. I want to provide some final tips in general. As I mentioned, you don't want to use copy and paste of a scanned signature. In our organization, we wouldn't even accept that as an authentic signature. It's just too easily copied and manipulated. You cannot rely on those from individuals. You want to retain, as I mentioned before, make sure you want to retain all your agreements, back them up, collect that acceptance information. With these signatures, you can only get it once, so you want to make sure that when you store that information, you're storing it properly, and that you're saving copies. Always, as I mentioned before, you're always going to want to be able to have those individuals who signed come back to you to get a copy. In certain circumstances, you may have to have courts. The judges look at those materials if you have to go to court. And finally, choose a process that works best for your organization, right? So every organization has a different culture and different needs. Pick the technology that works for your culture. Don't let the technology drive what you're trying to get to. Don't pick the technology first. Look and see how technology savvy are your individuals. Do they need a more simple approach, or are they ready for more advanced features? So in summary, electronic signatures can be more efficient. They can cut down on human error and time to produce and to sign documents. Make sure the process is exceptionally clear to your staff and to your users. You don't want to have to be answering questions or have any question about if a person actually signed a document. You want to make sure that they understand and that you understand what they've done. Consider digital signatures for the best protection. It is that's what they're designed for, and their use of cryptography and encryption helps protect the authenticity of the agreement of the document that they sign and of the signature. And make sure that you retain and protect that information. As I've said several times, retaining that information and protecting it, especially if you're collecting personal information, will help save not just financial burden, but also reputational issues. So that's the electronic signatures. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, and enjoy your day.